Hello, today we're going to talk about the game Heat Pedal to the Metal. This came out in 2022. It was like all the rage last year. Unfortunately, I never did get a copy until about a month ago, and I only was able to pull it out and play it this week. And I just have played it solo, played it by myself as 3 players. So that's what I'm going to show today. I know there's already lots of videos going over this game, but I have it now, so I figured I'd do one as well. So let's get started with how to set up. As usual, first thing you'll do is place the game board in the middle of the play area. It says the rules state for your first game to start with the USA map. The game comes with 2 double-sided boards, so a total of 4 maps. But as I mentioned, it does say for your first game to start with the USA map, so that's what we're going to do. Each player will then choose a color and take the corresponding play mat, car that matches the color, their gear token or gear pawn, the 12 basic cards in their color, so you'll have 3 number 1s, 3 number 2s, 3 number 3s, and 3 number 4s, and they have this speed icon on them. That's how you can tell they're the basic cards. And you'll take the 3 starting upgrade cards in your color, and you can see the color is shown here. You can tell they're the upgrade because they have those chevrons on them, and you should have each player should have a 0, a 5, and this is a heat card. You then check this section of the board, and it shows how many stress cards and how many heat cards to give to each player. So for this map, 3 stress cards and 6 heat cards. This is the stress deck, so we know each player should get 3 stress cards, so I'll give that cards, so I'll give that to the blue player. This is the regular heat deck, which is different than the starting upgrade heat card. It's all similar, but it doesn't have the player color on it there. And we know it said to give 6 heat cards to each player. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they'll place those in this space on their car. That's their engine space. They'll place those 6 heat cards there. Their starting upgrade cards, the starting stress cards that they got for this map 3, and their basic cards should all be shuffled together. After the players shuffled their cards together, they should put them here in this spot on the left-hand side of their player mat. The remaining heat cards can just go back in the box. The remaining stress deck should just be placed somewhere nearby. Players should then place their gear pawn on the number 1 spot here on their player mat. So I've set up for the green player and the red player as well. So you'll take the cars of all the players who are participating in the race, shuffle them up, and randomly place them, starting with the first one you randomly draw in the number 1 spot, starting spot, then the next one number 2, and so on, depending on how many players you're playing with. So I'm going to randomly draw green for my first one, blue for my second one, and red for my third. Each player will then draw 7 cards into their hand. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've done that for all my players. That hand of cards will be available to you in the first round of the game. Other than that, we are set up and ready to play. Now I will mention I'm going over the rules for the standard game or the core game. There is and it's some advanced rules that add additional components and rules into the game that can be put in modularly, I guess is the word, where you can add some of them or do some of them and not do some of them. I'll briefly touch on those at the end of the video, but for this rules overview and sample turns, I will only be going over the core game. So let's get started with how to play. First thing I'll mention there's some information on the board here. This tells you how many laps you should race on this track. So this one is a 2-lap race. Now the rules say that for your first race you should probably only race 1 lap, but normally this is a 2-lap race. This information here tells you how many spaces there are per lap. So each one of these squares is a space. So it's saying there's 69 squares or spaces to complete 1 lap on the track. And finally, this tells you how many turns there are on this track. 4 turns. You can tell the turns by this thick line with a number above it here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 turns on this track. Alright, so that was just some basic information. There's some other symbology on the map which doesn't really matter too much for the core rules. So let's get started with the core rules. Alright, the game will be played over several rounds. You'll keep playing rounds until players have all crossed the finish line. So each round can consist of multiple steps. There'll always be 4 steps. The steps that a player will play on a round can be seen here on their player mat, kind of like on their dashboard here. The mandatory steps are all highlighted by an exclamation mark here, so you can see there's the first step is always mandatory, the second step is mandatory, the third step is mandatory, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th are all optional and depends on what you want to do, and we'll talk about those later, and the 9th step is always mandatory. So let's talk about these steps in order. Now the first 2 steps, step 1 and step 2, which are mandatory steps, all players can do at the same time. So with that, the first step is you adjust your gear. So you start in first gear. You can adjust your gear up by 1 at no cost, so up or down by 1. So if you were in 3rd gear, you could move to 4th or 2nd gear at no cost. You can shift up or shift down 2 gears, but that costs you have to pay 1 heat if you do that. And we'll talk more about paying heat later, but when you pay a heat, you have to take a heat card from your engine and put it in your discard pile. You only start this lap or this race with 6 heat, so you can see that you don't want to have to pay heat too often. And you can see that here depicted on this image. You can shift up or down 1 at no cost. If you shift down 2 or up 2, this little engine with a fire on it is a heat symbol, so that says you'll have to pay a heat if you go up or down 2. So again, first step of the round, all players at the same time will adjust their gear. You can also decide just to leave your gear pawn where it is. You don't have to shift up or down. That's optional. Alright, the next step right here is play cards. Now you can or you must play a number of cards depending on what gear you're in. So if you're in 2nd gear, you have to play 2 cards. If you're in 1st gear, you can only play 1 card. If you're in 3rd gear, you have to and can only play 3 cards. 4th gear the same, you have to play 4 and you can only play 4. So for instance, I'm here in 2nd gear. That means I have to play exactly 2 cards. So when you play cards from your hand, and then you'll place the number of cards you're playing face down in front of your player mat. So for instance, this is my hand of cards. Now this number up on the top of these cards shows how many spaces that will cause your card to move. So if I played say for example a 5 and a 4, because I have to play 2 cards because I'm in 2nd gear, then that will have me move 9 spaces. Heat card doesn't do anything for you. It just clutters up your hand, so that doesn't help you move or anything. A stress card, they represent lapses in concentration around as you race around the track. according to the rules, but basically what they do is they give you this plus symbol, which is known as a boost symbol in the game. And when you play that, you don't know what speed that is going to cause you to go when you play it. So when you're resolving that card, if you've played it, you'll draw from your draw pile one at a time until you get a regular speed card that has this speedometer on it. So that will cause you to go that speed. So you're either going to go from speed 1 to 4. When you draw cards to resolve a stress card or a boost symbol, if you draw an upgrade card, you just put it in your discard pile face up in your mat. If you draw a heat card, you would just put it in your discard pile face up on your mat. So you would only resolve one that has a speedometer. And then you'll just cover your stress card with it, and that is going to be added to your other cards to determine your speed for that round. And again, we'll go over that further. But for now, we're just showing that we're in second gear. We're in the play card step. We got to play 2 cards. So, maybe this player decides he's going to play his 5 and his 4. So he would put him face down in front of him, like so. You don't reveal them at this point. And all players would do that at the same time. Play a number of cards according to what gear they're in, and placing them face down in front of their player mat. So for this example, we'll say all the players had shifted up to second gear, and so they're all playing 2 cards in front of them. The remaining steps, 3 through 9, are resolved by 1 player at a time, starting with the player who is the frontmost car. Now, if 2 cars are side by side like we have at the beginning here, the car that's considered to be the frontmost is the one that's closest to the race line. The race line is this thicker line on the side of the track. So in this case, and we know because he's number 1, that car is considered to be the frontmost car. If later they were here, the blue car would be considered to be the frontmost car because he's closest to the race line, the thicker line there. You can see that the race line may switch sides of the track. So here on this portion of the track, the race line is on this side, but after you go around this corner, you can see it switches to the other side. So as I mentioned, starting with the frontmost car and then working your way backwards from the next frontmost car and so forth, each player will resolve steps 3 through 9. So in this case, again, green is the frontmost car, so he will resolve steps 3 through 9 first. So step 3, which is a mandatory step, is to reveal and move your car. So you'll reveal the card you played. So in this example, green played a 3 and a 2, so that's 5. So he'll move a total of 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll always put your car on a spot closest to the race line if possible. If this blue car was already here and green was moving 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, the closest spot to the race line is already occupied, so he would place his car here. If the red car was going to land where both of these cars is, he would place his car closest to the race line in the next available space behind the occupied spaces. But cars will not block you. Like if red was going to move here, if he had enough speed where he could move here, he wouldn't be blocked by those 2 cars. He would still pass them. It's only if he was going to land where they're at that he would end up having to go to the space behind them. To go over again how a stress card works, if green had played a 3 and a stress card instead of a 3 and a 2, which we showed in our first example, if he had played a 3 and a stress card, then in the reveal and move spot he would reveal his 3 and his stress card, And before he moves, we have to determine what the stress card is. So again, as I mentioned, you'd start drawing from your draw pile to see what that is going to be. If it's another stress card, if you draw anything but a regular speed card, then it just goes into your discard pile. So that would just go into his discard pile. Right here, he drew a regular 3, so he'd place it on top of his stress card, and he would have a speed of 6, and then he would move 6 spaces. So again, when you're resolving a stress card or a boost, which you'll get this symbol, which we'll talk about from other effects, but it's always the same. It's a boost symbol where you'll draw from your draw deck to determine what that speed is, and the only valid cards are cards with a speed symbol here, so a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Any other will go into your discard pile. But now we'll go back to our first example where he played a 3 and a 2, so for a total of 5, and he moves 5 spaces, putting himself closest to the race line if possible. Alright, so after you've done your reveal and move step, you then move on to this step, which is the adrenaline step. Now the only player that resolves the adrenaline step is the player who is last to move that round. So in this case, green was the first to move this round, so he would not resolve the adrenaline step. So it's only the player that's last to move that round, or if you're playing with 5 or more cars, I'm only playing with 3. If you were playing with 5 or more, then it's the last 2 players to move that round. But the adrenaline step doesn't really give you anything to do that round. What it does give you, if you're the person or people that get to resolve it, the last player, or in a 5 or more car race, the last 2 players to move that round, it gives you a couple of optional symbols that you'll get to use in the next step. So you can, if you are resolving the adrenaline, you can increase your speed by 1, which will add 1 to your speed value. And or you can gain 1 cooldown symbol. And we'll talk about a cooldown symbol here in the next step, which is the react step, which is where you would resolve any symbols that you decided to resolve if you could do the adrenaline. So let's move on to step number 5, the react step. This is where you'll resolve any other symbols that you may have available to you, like if you got the adrenaline or one of the symbols from the gear you're in. So you'll see, depending on what gear you're in, you'll always have a boost symbol available to you, which works similarly to a stress card. It has that plus symbol. You can see it's got the plus symbol. So that's a boost. But when you use a boost from the gear, you can see it's got the heat symbol, so you have to pay 1 heat, taking it from your engine, putting it in your discard pile in order to use that boost symbol. And that would work just like the boost symbol on a stress card. If you decide to use that and activate it, you'd pay 1 heat, and then you draw cards from your draw deck until you get a valid one with a speed symbol on it, and then that will add to your speed for this round. So that's one symbol you could use in the react step. The other one you can use if you're in first or second gear is a cooldown. You can see if you're in second gear, you get 1 cooldown symbol. If you're in first gear, you get 3 cooldown symbols. And what the cooldown does, it allows you to discard heat cards from your hand. That's really the only way. Once you get, when you pay heat, it goes into your discard pile. When your draw deck runs out, you'll shuffle your discard pile, and that's what and then that'll make your new draw pile. So eventually you'll be drawing heat cards into your hand, and they just clutter it up. You cannot play them for anything. So they end up cluttering up your hand. So the only way to get rid of them is to use the cooldown symbols that you can get from either being in first or second gear, or if you get the adrenaline, that gives you a one cooldown symbol as well. And you can see if you're in first gear and you use the cooldown symbol, you can discard 3 stress cards back into your engine. If you're in second gear and you use the cool down symbol, you can put one stress card back into your engine. And if you were able to use the adrenaline step, that has one cooldown that would let you put an additional cooldown or an additional stress card from your hand back into your engine. So to reiterate, in step 5, the react step, you can use additional symbols you have access to. You can do the boost, which we talked about how that works, but again, that will cost you 1 heat. You'll have to take 1 heat. If you don't have a heat available in your engine, then you can't do it. But if you do, then you put a heat from your engine into your discard pile, and then draw, just like if you were playing a stress card, and move your car accordingly to what speed you got. But that does add to your total speed, which will come into play in a minute when we talk about going around corners. And you also, if you're in first or second gear, or if you got the adrenaline step, have boost available to you, cooldown available to use if you have heat cards in your hand that you can that you need to discard back into your engine. And of course, also the adrenaline I mentioned gives you 1 extra speed if you want to use it, but it does add 1 to your total speed value, and that allows you to move your car 1 extra space. Alright, so now, next, after you choose to do any or none of those that are available to you, you move on to the slipstream step. And that allows you to slipstream by cars or around cars. After you move from your movement and then any boost or adrenaline step, after you've completed any additional movement there, if your car ended up behind another car, you can see you can slipstream by moving 2 spaces forward. So 1, 2. You could move 2 spaces forward like that. Slipstreaming does not add to your total speed, by the way. If you end up right next to a car, as in this symbol, you can slipstream and move 2 ahead. So 1, 2. Again, slipstreaming is optional and it does not add to your total speed. And just like the image shows here, it only applies if you end up behind another car or right next to another car. Alright, let's move on to step 7, which is the check corner step. If you pass a corner, which is one of these thick lines with a number up here at the top, remember we saw on this map there's 4 corners on this racetrack. If during your turn you pass a corner, then you have to check if you've exceeded the speed limit for that corner. So in this case, on this corner, the speed limit is 7. So if on the turn you pass this corner line, if your total speed of cards that you played, plus if you use the adrenaline, plus if you use boost and drew additional cards, if the total speed you used to come around that corner is greater than the speed limit, then you have to pay heat equal to the difference. So if you came around this corner, if Green came around this corner and his total speed was 7, right now it's really only 5, but if his total speed was 7, he would be safe because it's equal to or less than the speed. However, if he came around this corner and the total speed that he had played was, say, 8 to get to here, then he's exceeded the speed limit of 7 by 1, so he would have to pay 1 heat by taking 1 heat and putting it into his engine. If he had come around here with a speed of 9, he's exceeded the speed limit by 2, so he would have to pay 2 heat by putting 2 heat from his engine into his discard pile. If you can't pay the heat, so if I came around this corner at 9, speed limit 7, so I exceeded it by 2, so I have to pay 2 heat. If, for instance, I only had 1 heat in my engine, and so I didn't have both heat that I was required to pay, then you spin out. So if you spin out, you move your car back to the first available space before the corner that you passed. So in this case, he would move back to here. You do, by the way, pay any heat that you could pay. So like I said, if I exceeded by 2, but I only had 1 heat to pay, I would still pay that 1, but I would still spin out. So I would have to go back to the first available space before the corner. And then if you look under here, you'll see if you were in first or second gear, you have to take 1 extra stress card from the pile and put it into your hand. If you were in third or fourth gear, and when you spin out, you've got to take 2 extra stress cards from the reserve pile and place them into your hand. And then you always have to automatically shift back to first gear. So spinning out is not a good thing, so you always want to try to not go around a corner faster than the speed limit. That first corner on this track, the speed limit is 7. That's not too bad, but you can see down some of these tighter corners, the speed limit's a lot slower to go around those. And again, if you're going the speed limit or less when you go around the corner, then there's no effect. Alright, so then we go on to the next step, again, which is an optional step, discard. At this point, you can discard any other cards in your hand into your discard pile. Discard pile is face up, by the way, if I hadn't mentioned that. Although you can never look through your own discard pile or another player's discard pile. But you'll always see at least what's on top of it. Anyway, in step 8, you can discard cards from your hand. Of course, you can never discard a heat card. You can tell that because it's got the little trash can discard symbol with an X in it. You can't discard a heat card, and you can't discard stress cards. They have the same symbol. So any card that has that symbol in step 8, you cannot discard them. Any other ones you can. And then finally go to step 9, which is a mandatory step, where you'll draw from your draw deck back into your hand up to 7 cards. When you're resolving step 9, then you're going to replenish your hand. You take all the cards that you played in your play area, put them into your discard pile first, and then you draw back up to 7. The next car, that started with the car furthest ahead, then or foremost car. Then the next car back will resolve their steps 3 through 9, and so forth until all players have finished resolving. And then you'll start a new round with step 1 again. If at any time during the game you have to draw or flip or something like that, and your draw pile is empty, then you'll shuffle what's in your discard pile to create a new draw pile. Now, if that happens during your turn, like you're drawing cards to resolve a stress card or a boost symbol, and it runs out, then you shuffle your discard pile, but you would not take the cards that are in your play area and shuffle those up. They stay in your play area. One thing that can happen if you end up with so many heat cards in your hand, and as I said, those aren't playable, so they end up cluttering your hand. If, for example, you shifted to third gear, and so when you went to play your cards, you needed to play 3 playable cards, and you don't have enough because your hand is cluttered with heat cards, so you only have like maybe 1 playable card and the rest are heat cards. You go ahead and play your 3 cards from your hand, your 1 playable card, and then 2 of your heat cards. You play those face down, just like you would regular cards. But then when you reveal, you don't get to move, even if you played 2 playable speed cards and had to play 1 heat card. You don't get to move. You just shift your car down into first gear, immediately take the cards you played into your discard pile, and then go to step 9, skip all the other steps, go to step 9, drawing back up to 7 cards. So that's definitely not a good thing, as you don't get to move at all that round. So that's it. You keep playing rounds until a car passes the finish line. 2 cars pass the finish line during the same round, or more than 1 car, not 2 cars necessarily. If more than 1 car passes the finish line at the same time, after you've raced the requisite number of laps, of course, not just after 1 lap. Of course, on the first game they recommend only 1 lap, but normally you're playing this for 2 laps, so it wouldn't be until after a car passes the finish line after the second lap. Again, at the end of the round, if more than 1 car has passed the finish line, then whichever one is further ahead, or the foremost car, they get moved up here and they'll be in first place, and then the second one, so forth, second place. If other cars still haven't finished, then they'll play another round and determine what place they're in. And again, whichever car is closest to the race line is considered ahead. So if 2 cars, pass the finish line at the end of a round, and they were both right next to each other like this, the green car being closest to the race line would be considered to be further ahead than the red car. And of course, needless to say, the winner is the car who finished first. Second place is who finished second, and so forth. I should mention that you cannot cross the finish line using slipstream, and you cannot use slipstream after you cross the finish line. Also, after you cross the finish line, if you happen to pass any corners, you just ignore. There's no corner check or anything. So if you came around this finish line going really fast and came all the way past this corner at 17 or something, you don't have to worry about a corner check then. So once you pass the finish line, no slipstreaming and no corner checks. That's pretty much it. That's how you play the core game of Heat Pedal to the Metal. So why don't I reshuffle these decks, get everything set back up how it was after setup, and we'll go through some example rounds. Alright, I've got everything set back up how it was right after setup, and we'll go through example rounds. Now remember, these cards that I've got down here would normally be in a player's hands. Just because I'm playing solo, I've got them down here, but normally they would have them in their hand. So we'll just pretend these are the player's hands here. Alright, so we're set up, ready to go. We start with step 1, so all players do that at the same time. They decide what gear they can shift up 1 or 2. If they shift up or down 2, they've got to pay heat. So we'll say blue player, he's going to just shift up 1. We'll say green player, he's going to shift up 2, so he's going to pay a heat. And we'll say the red player is just going to shift up 1, so he doesn't have to pay heat. Alright, next, all players do this at the same time. They play their cards. So the blue player, he's in second gear. He's got to play 2 cards. So we'll look at his hand. He's gonna play this 5 and put that face down, and he's gonna play this 4. So he would choose those 2 cards. Again, put them face down. The other players don't know what he's played. Green player, maybe he's going to play a 3 and a stress, so he would put those face down in front of him. Oh, he shifted up 2, so he'll actually have to play a 3rd card. Maybe he'll play this 2. Alright. And the red player, he just went into second gear, so he's got to play 2 cards, so maybe he'll play his 4, and he'll play a stress card as well. Alright, so all players do that at the same time. They play a number of cards according to what gear they're in. And now, starting with the foremost player, which in this case is the green, he's in first at the start of the race, he will now reveal and move. So he reveals his cards. Now this one he played as a stress, so we have to determine what that is. So he draws. That's another stress, so that just goes into his discard. He draws again. That's a valid card because it's got the speed symbol on it. So he's got a total of 8. So he'll move his card 8 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, putting it closest to the race line. Alright, now next is the Adrenaline. He's not the last card to move, so he skips that. Next is the React. So he doesn't have a cooldown symbol because he's in 3rd gear, so he can't do a cooldown. He could boost if he wanted to by paying another heat, but I don't think he wants to do that this time, so he's not going to be using any symbols. So now Slipstream, well, he didn't land behind or next to another car, so he doesn't slipstream. Corner check, he did not pass a corner, so he doesn't have to do that. So now discard, so he'll look at his hands, and yeah, he probably wants to discard this 0, so he'll put that in his discard pile. He can't discard this one or this one. He'll keep his 2. So that leaves 3 cards in his hand. Alright, so now we get to the replenish hand step, which is mandatory. So first he takes all the cards from his play area, puts them face up in his discard pile. Now he draws back up to his hand size of 7. So he's got 3 cards in his hand, so he'll draw 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so that's going to end his turn. So now we look at the next car, which is the red cars, the next car in order. So he will reveal his. He played a 4 and a stress, so now we have to determine what that stress is. So he'll start drawing a 3. That's valid. Alright, so he has a total of 7, so he'll move 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Puts him right behind that green car. Alright, next we go to the Adrenaline. He's not the last car to move, or if we were playing with 5 cards, one of the last 2. He's not in either case because we're only playing with 3 cards. Alright, so next we go here to the React step. So he is in 2nd gear, so he could spend he could pay a heat to boost. So we'll just say he's going to do that. So he's going to pay a heat, takes a heat from his engine, puts it into his discard pile, and then he's going to boost. So it's just like if he had played a stress card, so he's going to start flipping cards up. That's a valid. It's only a 1. That kind of sucks to pay a heat for a 1. But now he'll move right next to the green car there because he moved up 1. And then he can use his cooldown symbol to take a heat card from his hand, which he does have one, the one he started with. He'll use that cooldown to take that heat card from his hand and put it into his engine. Alright, so that ends his React step. Now he goes to the Slipstream. He is right next to somebody, so he can move up 2. 1, 2. Alright, so that's his Slipstream. Next we go to the corner check. He did not pass a corner, so nothing to do there. Discard. Does he want to discard anything? Yeah, maybe he wants to discard this 1. So he'll discard that into his discard pile. He'll keep these others. Alright, and finally the replenish hand. So he'll discard all the cards he played into his discard pile. And then he's got 3 cards, so he's got to draw 4. Alright, now his hand is back up to 7. Alright, that's going to end his turn. So now the blue car finally gets their turn. So they will start with step 3 and reveal the cards they played. He played a total of 9, speed of 9, so he'll move 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's going to put him right next to the green car there. Alright, now he comes to the Adrenaline step. He is the last car to move, so that gives him, he can use the Adrenaline step so he can add 1 speed to his total in the React step, and it gives him a cooldown. So he'll move on to the react step. He can add 1 speed, which he'll do because he's using his adrenaline. So he's going to add a total of 1 speed. That'll move him 1 to here. So his total is now 10 that he would have to take into account if he crossed a corner, which it doesn't look like he's going to. Now he could boost if he wanted to by paying a heat, and he can cool down 2 because he's got 1 from his adrenaline for being last and 1 here, but I don't know if he has any heat cards in his hand. Well, he does have 1, so he will use a cooldown to return this heat card. His engine, and then that's all. He's not going to boost, so he'll just keep those 3 cards. Alright, so now we move on to the slipstream. He does get to slipstream because he's behind a car, so he gets to move up 2. 1, 2. Alright, and now corner check. He did not pass a corner, so he doesn't do that. Discard. Does he want to discard anything? Yeah, he'll discard this 1, so he'll put that in his discard pile. Alright, he'll keep these 2. Alright, now replenish hand. What is this? Alright, now replenish hand, so he will put these 2 in his discard pile. And he's got 3. So he'll draw back up to 7, so he needs 4. Alright, he's got a hand of 7, and that will end the round. Alright, so we'll do one more round. Alright, so now all players will do step 1 at the same time. They'll shift gears. Now, they're coming up on a corner, so they probably don't want to be going too fast around that corner, but they can go up to 7, so I think blue decides he's just going to stay in 2nd gear. Green, he's going to go ahead and shift down 1 to 2nd gear. And red, he's going to stay in 2nd gear. Alright, so nobody has to pay a heat because they didn't shift at all or didn't shift up or down more than 1. Alright, so play cards step, so all players will do that at the same time. So blue's in 2nd gear, so he's got to play 2 cards. Now he's right at the corner, but he can go up to 7, so he's not too worried about it. So he's going to play these 2, his 4 and his 3, that add up to 7. So he's got to play 2 cards, so he's going to play those 2 in front of him. Green, he's in 2nd gear, so he's got to play 2 cards. He's going to play, we'll have him play his 2 4s. So he puts those face down in front of him again so the other players don't see what he's going to play. And red is also in 2nd gear, so he's going to play 2 cards as well. He'll play his 2 4s. So just put those out if I can grab them. Alright, so he would play those face down in front of him. Alright, so now everybody's completed steps 1 and 2. So now the foremost car, which is the blue car now, he will complete steps 3 through 9 first. So step 3, reveal and play. He reveals, he's got a 7, a total of 7. So he will move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and go closest to the race line. Alright, adrenaline, well he's not the last car to move, so that doesn't matter. Alright, next is the react step. Well, he definitely doesn't want to use a boost because that will put him over a speed of 7, and then he will have to pay heat for that. I mean, he could, if he wanted to go faster, it might be a good idea to go ahead and pay heat to do that. But he's not going to. We'll just say he decides not to do that. He thinks he's leading the race anyway, so he's not going to do anything in the react step. Slipstream, well, he's not behind or next to any cars, so he can't do that. Alright, so corner check. He did go around the corner with a speed limit of 7. He only went a total of 7, so he's fine. He didn't go over that. So now we can go to the discard. Looking at his hand, well, he can't discard any of those stress cards, so he doesn't want to get rid of his 3 or 2, so he's not going to discard anything. So now we go to the replenish hand, so these 2 will get put in his discard pile. He's got 5 cards in his hand, so he just draws 2. And that's going to end his turn. Alright, the next car is the red car. So he will reveal and move. Step 3. Alright, so he did 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He can't go where that one is, so he just goes next to it. Alright, next is Adrenaline. He's not the last one, so he doesn't get anything from that. Alright, so next he's in the react step. He doesn't want to boost because he's already exceeded the speed limit. So he doesn't want to do that. He does have 1 cooldown available, but I don't think he has any heat cards in his engine. No, he does. I mean, in his hand. No, he doesn't, so he doesn't need to do a cooldown. So now we move on to the Slipstream. He is right next to a car, so he gets to move up 2. Oops. That goes according to that image. And now the check corner. Well, the speed limit on the corner is 7. He did pass the corner 8, so he exceeds it by 1. So he does have to pay a heat by putting a heat from his engine into his discard pile. Alright, now we go to the discard. Does he have anything? Yeah, he wants to discard this 0. And he could maybe, he'll keep the rest of those. And now he goes on to the replenish hand step, so he'll take these cards he played, put them in his discard pile. He's at 4, so he's got to draw 3. 1, 2, 3. Alright, and that's his hand for the next round. Alright, and finally we come to the green car, who's way back there, so he reveals his now. He's playing 8, so he's got to move 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's right there. Alright, next is the Adrenaline step. So now he decides if he wants to use any of those symbols, or he'll have those symbols available to him because he is the last one to move. He'll have those symbols available to him in the react step. So alright, so he goes to the react step. He will use this symbol here, which lets him increase his speed by 1 and move by 1, so he will do that. But now that makes his speed 9 instead of 8. He could boost, but he doesn't want to pay a heat to boost. He does have a cooldown available from this and from this, so we'll check his hand. He does have a heat card in his hand, so he will use one of those cooldowns to discard it. He doesn't have any other heat cards in his hand. Alright, so now we move on to the Slipstream. He can Slipstream because he's behind a car, so he'll move up here. Now you only get to Slipstream once, so even though he landed behind another car, he doesn't get to Slipstream again. You only get to do that once per round. Alright, and now we go to the corner check. The speed limit on the corner is 7. He came around it at 8 plus the 1 speed he used from this for 9, so 9. So he exceeded the speed of the corner by 2, so he's got to pay 2 heat. So 1, 2. Oh, I knocked this over, but he was in second gear. Now if he didn't have the heat to pay, then he would spin out and have to move back to the corner. But he did have the heat to pay. Alright, so now we go to the discard. Does he have anything? He can't discard the stress. He will discard one of these 1s. Alright, so that leaves him with 3 cards. Now we go on to the replenish hand step, so these get discarded. And he's got to draw 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, and that's his hand for the next round. And that would end the round, and then we would start the next round again with, shifting gears. And we just got maybe a quarter way around the track. But you can see now some of these players are starting to get some heat into their discard pile. So when they, like this guy's already only got one card left to draw from there, and then he'll have to shuffle up his discard pile. So they'll have to be careful about gaining heat going forward, because they're starting to get, some into their discard pile, which are eventually going to end up in their hand and, start clogging it up. But you can see how the game plays. And if you were playing 2 laps, they'd have to go all the way around and then all the way around again until somebody finishes. Again, for your first game, it says just play 1 lap. But that's it. That's how this game plays. I mean, I think going over what I've shown should give you a pretty good idea. The different tracks, some of them have more turns closer together, maybe where you can't build up a lot of speed, but some where you can build up more before you have to slow down. As I said, I haven't played it with anybody else. I've just played it by myself, playing as 3 players. And I've enjoyed it so far. I think it obviously would be more fun with playing with other players. I'll go ahead and touch on real quick some of the advanced rules. One of the advanced rules modules is Garage Mode, in which you will not use the 3 standard upgrade cards that you start and use in the core game. Instead, you'll get rid of those. And there's these other upgrade cards that there's all different kinds. And what you'll do is have a draft. And so each player will end up with 3 upgrade cards, but they'll be different than the other players. And so that makes each player's deck a little bit unique, as they'll each have 3 of these upgrade cards in their deck. And they have symbology that's a little bit, some similar to what we've seen, but some different. And at the back of the rule book, it shows what all these symbols are. But they're similar. You can slipstream 3 instead of 2, or an extra 3 spaces instead of 2, but it costs you a heat or something like that. I haven't looked too much into it, but they're all just a riff off the symbology we've already seen. But anyway, so that lets you customize your car a little bit. That's one of the modules you can add. There is weather and road conditions, where you'll end up putting one of these weather tiles here on the board, and some of these road condition tiles on some of these tents around the board, and they will add, again, different effects to the game, but they're, similar to effects we've already seen. Like they'll give you a cool down or add heat. I don't know that. And the road conditions will give you certain effects depending on where they are on certain sections of the track or on certain corners of the track. But anyway, they just affect the track differently depending on what weather or road condition tile you end up putting out. There's a Legends module that lets you use these cards, and then there's another Legend player sheet. And basically that adds AI or bot cars to the race. And in fact, they suggest using some of those AI cars if you're playing with less than 4 players or 4 cars. So you can play it solo and add as many extra cars as you want to the race. Or if you're playing with only 3 players, then they suggest at least adding 1 more. So you always have at least 4 cars in the race. And these just... Again, I haven't done it yet, but they they're colored. You see they have a color for each car in the race that's a bot, and it tells how they're going to move and how they're going to approach corners and that kind of thing. So it just adds a bot to the race, or more than 1. You can add as many as you want. And then there's a championship season module where you'll have several races, and you can gain sponsors and get have different events for the races and that kind of thing. So again, just another way to play, and all those rules I have not played with, but I am going to try the Legends to add some AI cars to the race, just the standard race next, and see how that works out. I think it should be easy and fun. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. It's getting long, but thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.